From illegal contraband chocolates to explosives hidden in chewing gum, these are 8 harmful candies that have been banned. Kinder Surprise. A popular candy from the brand Ferrero, the Kinder Surprise is a chocolate egg that contains a toy inside. These things are awesome and super popular in Europe. Created by the Italian company to recreate the tradition of adults giving children large chocolate eggs with toys inside, it's easy to see how they became so popular with children. With more than 30 billion Kinder Surprise eggs sold worldwide since the 1970s, it might surprise you to know that they have been banned in certain places. Inside the chocolate egg, there is a yellow plastic capsule that contains a tiny toy, and that's where the problems began. In the year 2000, a family in the United Kingdom who had lost their child to choking on the toy inside the sweets campaigned for the products to be banned from the European Union. The matter was even discussed in the House of Commons, with some saying that there would be a few toys left in the marketplace if they started banning every product that could be swallowed by a child. In the United States, candies that have toys or trinkets embedded inside were banned. Because the toys within the eggs have small parts, the Consumer Product Safety Commission recalled some Kinder Surprise that were illegally brought into the United States. The chocolates and their toys are still legal in Canada and Mexico, but they are illegal to import into the United States. In 2011, US Customs and Border Protection threatened a $300 Canadian dollar fine for a Manitoba resident who was trying to bring an egg across the US border into Minnesota. And in 2012, 2 Seattle men were found to have 6 Kinder eggs in their car after a trip to Vancouver and were warned with a potential fine of $2,500 per egg. Although a different type of chocolate egg now under the Kinder label is being sold in the United States, it does not have the toy surprise inside, which may prevent children from choking on it, but I can't help but think it has taken some of the fun out of this chocolate. But what do you think? Should this toy wrapped in a chocolate shell be banned? Let me know your opinions in the comments below, and while you're there, remember to subscribe if you haven't already. There are lots of great new videos coming out all the time, and you won't want to miss even one. Candy cigarettes. We all know that children shouldn't smoke, but these banned candies were considered a gateway to real cigarettes. Anti-smoking ads may not be as common as they once were, but at one time they were all over television and print media. In an effort to fight against the dangers of smoking, candies that resembled cigarettes were quick to be pulled off the market. Do you remember seeing those chalky, hard candy cigarettes or paper-wrapped bubblegum cigarettes that puffed out white smoke when you blew on them? If you're young, you may not even know that they once existed. How did they become so trendy and then disappear? Candy cigarettes first hit the market in the early 1930s when smoking wasn't seen as such a health concern. But in the 1950s, as health reports started to surface on the dangers of smoking, parents started to get a little suspicious of seeing their kids enjoying candy shaped like cigarettes. Another problem was the packaging and how similar these candies looked to real cigarettes, with some parents worrying it was a slippery slope for kids who might not know the difference between real and fake cigarettes. As a way to try and bypass the ban, some companies removed the name cigarettes from the packaging and instead called them sticks, but by then, it seemed a little too late. They are more hard to find, and some countries like Brazil, Finland, Ireland, and even Saudi Arabia have completely banned the sale of the cigarette candies altogether. Obscene packaging. Another company who got in trouble for the packaging of their candies is Haribo. They make all types of gummies and candies and are very popular around the world, but a controversy arose some years back with this brand and forced them to rethink their marketing. Funny enough, it wasn't necessarily controversy due to what the candy looked like, but instead, the somewhat inappropriate packaging on the boxes. The Mao-Am sour candies for children feature illustrations of various cartoon fruit characters in provocative poses. The lemons, limes, and cherries are all in vibrant, bright colors, which might entice children to pick up the candy. But unfortunately, for overly protective parents, they may find their kids have stumbled upon suggestive packaging that may cause some questions to surface over what is exactly going on between the grinning fruit on this sweet packaging. It's unclear what the next steps will be for this company and their controversial cartoon characters. Pop Rocks spin-off just too tempting. We all heard the urban legend about drinking soda while eating Pop Rocks, but did you know that the same creator for the candy had another controversial sweet in its product line? Also the inventor of Jell-O, Tang, and Cool Whip, General Foods decided to create a spin-off product called Space Dust that was basically Pop Rocks crushed into a fine powder. Unfortunately, it was not just the name that was controversial. Various powdered drugs were becoming very well known and infamous when the candy was launched, and the nickname for one of those drugs, angel dust, was a little too close for comfort for parents looking to buy their children a sweet treat at the local store. The photograph of the smiling moon man on the front with a twirling, glittering trail of candy also appeared a little suggestive to parents. General Foods later rebranded the product under a new name, Cosmic Candy, to remove the impression that it was selling drugs to children, but the product was eventually discontinued and Cosmic Candy fell into obscurity. They should have kept well aware of what other meanings might have existed for their name for a harmless candy. It's better to be safe than sorry. Black Licorice. Get any group of candy lovers together and there's bound to be a debate over whether black licorice is a tasty treat or one that people turn their nose up at. But did you know that black licorice could actually be dangerous? According to the Food and Drug Administration, black licorice can lead to heart arrhythmias and other health problems when people eat too much in one sitting. It takes only 2 ounces of black licorice a day for 2 weeks to make your heart stutter, and apparently the culprit to this problem is a compound called glycyrrhizin, which is what gives the licorice its sweet flavor. Apparently, glycyrrhizin rids the kidneys of their potassium, and low levels of potassium can make the heart beat out of sync or dangerously fast. The compound can also increase salt and water retention, which is a problem for people with heart failure and high blood pressure. Even though licorice was sometimes prescribed in some parts of the world as a treatment for heartburn and viral infections, the FDA continues to believe that it cannot heal anything and instead can tweak the metabolic process of the human body and interfere with the metabolism and other bodily functions. So for those who want to indulge in a little black licorice this Halloween, you might want to make sure you limit your consumption to avoid any nasty side effects. It's way better to be safe and just have it in moderation. Choose a different candy to get your sweet fix if you can. Lyy Fruit Candy. While some of these bans may seem silly or funny, other dangerous treats have resulted in deadly outbreaks in other parts of the world. In 2013, an investigator moved to a city in India to try to figure out the cause of one of the country's most mysterious outbreaks. For some reason, over the previous years, parents took their children to the hospital like clockwork in mid-May. After the children began having seizures and slipping into comas, in about 40% of the cases, the children also died. Then, every year in July when the monsoon rains came, the outbreaks ended as suddenly as they began. While this tragic wave of mysterious illness continued for a number of years, various reasons for the outbreaks were attributed to heat stroke, infections from animals such as rats or bats, and even pesticides used in local lychee orchards. But for whatever reason, the outbreaks occurred in clusters, with the illness only striking one child in the village and mysteriously often leaving their siblings unaffected. It would take a joint investigation from India's National Center for Disease Control and the India Office of the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention in Atlanta to find the culprit. It turns out that when the children ate the lychee fruit on an empty stomach, it affected them strangely. Most were malnourished and had very low blood sugar levels, so when they ate the fruit, it affected them gravely. After conducting multiple tests on a number of children, they found that there is a toxin in the fruit that led to a very low blood glucose levels. Because the lychee orchards were everywhere, children often ate the fruit when they were unripe and had fallen onto the ground, making it even more deadly when their parents didn't know that they had been eating it. Unfortunately, it took a number of deaths for investigators to pinpoint the cause, but now that they have, young children in the area are encouraged to always eat an evening meal and limit their consumption of the lychees. Luckily, it seems to have curbed the outbreaks. Exploding chewing gum. In 2009, a Ukrainian man with a strange habit of dipping his gum in citric acid died after his jaw was blown off. The chemistry student, named Vladimir, was a student at the Kyiv Polytechnic Institute. Apparently, Vlad had a habit of chewing gum and dipping it in the substance while he was working. Why did he consume so much citric acid? It's hard to say, but some folks believe that consuming a lot of it could be healthy for them. While working on his computer one Saturday night, his mother heard the sound of an explosion. After she went to his room, she found her son on the floor with his face bleeding and his jaw blown off. After conducting forensic tests on the piece of gum, researchers found it was laced with an unidentified chemical that was probably an explosive. After finding both a strange substance and citric acid near the young man's body, police officials believe he may have confused the two. He accidentally dipped his gum in explosives as opposed to his citric acid, leading to tragedy. With an affinity for making homemade firecrackers and the wish to become a scientist when he grew up, it seems that young Vladimir was playing with fire that night. Unfortunately, he lost his life for it. This is an important lesson in being very careful, especially around explosives. Candyman. With Halloween coming, the usual warnings of not eating candy from strangers and making sure you check your loot bag before you eat any will be front and center from parents trying to protect their children. But it turns out it is not just a folktale. In the 1970s, a man in Texas ended up a real-life monster doling out tainted candy. After having dinner with friends, Ronald Clark O'Brien, his wife, and their 2 children, Timothy and Elizabeth, headed out for a little trick-or-treating. After visiting a dark house along the route, the children moved on to another house, but not before O'Brien came running up, waving 5 giant pixie sticks in front of the children. Telling them that a group of rich neighbors were distributing the treats, he gave them away to his children as well as the friend's child, and to 2 others who rang the doorbell on his house later. Unfortunately, the kids later decided to eat the candy, and when O'Brien heard his child crying for him, he found his son complaining his stomach hurt before he started vomiting. After the boy went limp and later died, an autopsy was conducted and it was found that he had enough cyanide in his body to kill 3 grown men. Investigators examined the pixie sticks and found that someone had opened the tube and replaced the contents with poison. Luckily, the other tubes were recovered before any of the other children ate the contents. Luckily though, police became suspicious of O'Brien's story, and when they looked into his background, they found that he was $100,000 in debt and had lost his house. It turns out he had been stealing money from his job and had taken out a $60,000 life insurance policy on his children. Police believe that he had planned to kill his kids for the insurance money. Within days of the evidence coming to light, O'Brien was arrested for the murder of his son. Unfortunately, the detective couldn't find the source of the cyanide, but a number of witnesses believe he had mentioned that he had told them he was interested in getting the poison and wondered how much it would take to kill someone. Justice was served and O'Brien was found guilty of murder. He received the death penalty, but that was not the end of the story. Even though he appealed for some 10 years, in 1984 he was set to be executed by lethal injection. But O'Brien wouldn't get away with hiding from the prying eyes of those he had wronged. On the day of his execution, a number of demonstrators stood outside the prison in Halloween masks shouting "Trick or treat" to taunt the despicable killer. What do you think of these various banned candies or dangerous encounters with these treats? From mysterious structures in the deep desert that baffle researchers to a strange tomb with an unsettling design, here are 8 archaeological discoveries scientists can't explain. Ancient stone tools. Every scientist who has ever set out on an expedition hopes that the objects they find can answer some questions of ancient humans, but a discovery in India in 2018 could possibly upend our view of Stone Age humans in Asia. In what is now southern India, ancient innovators ditched their hand axes and cleavers and took up flakes of stone to cut meat and to tip their spears. Similar changes occurred in Africa to the ancestors of modern humans around the same time, but something discovered in the soil layers from some 250,000 years ago showed that this transition between tools occurred far earlier than it did other sites in India. This discovery changes the date of the Middle Paleolithic culture in the region by more than 100,000 years. This could reshape how scientists view how humans and their ancient relatives spread across the world, migrating out of Africa some 60,000 years ago. The discovery shows that the populations were present in most parts of southern Asia, adapted to local factors, changing their tools through time. It also shows how ancient humans lived in South Asia, where there is not much of the fossil record to be studied. More than 90% of humans today have descended from a small population of Homo sapiens that left Africa between 60,000 and 125,000 years ago. As these early humans fanned out and reached the tip of South America about 18,000 years ago, they carried with them stone tools that were better than stone hand axes and cleavers used by an earlier culture. But this find gives more evidence to the theory that multiple waves of humans left Africa before the migration shown in our modern collective DNA. This suggests that modern humans left earlier than previously thought. This discovery also helps to shed some light on India's ancient humans, who are mostly understudied, with only 2 ancient hominin fossils ever found in the region. But answers like this don't come quickly. The team who discovered this missing part of the puzzle has been digging through 30 feet of sediment 1 inch at a time for more than 20 years. Luckily, their hard work has paid off, and a new piece of the ancient human puzzle can now be fitted into place with the others that make up the entire picture of humanity's evolution. Mysterious structures in Saudi Arabia. In the west-central region of Saudi Arabia, almost 400 mysterious stone structures were discovered gaping across old lava domes. Dating back thousands of years, these wall-like formations are still a mystery, with researchers questioning their purpose, their age, and why they were built. Originally discovered by satellite images, the gates are located on the side of a volcanic dome that once spewed lava. Built from stone, the gates are believed to be the oldest man-made structures in the landscape with no explanation for their purpose. The smallest extends about 43 feet, 13 meters, while the longest is almost 1,700 feet, 520 meters long. Many of them have multiple stone walls that form a rectangular design. Although no archaeological fieldwork has been conducted on the gates, more study will need to be undertaken to determine what they are and when they were built. So what exactly were these gates built for? Considering the fact that each one appeared to lead towards domes of lava, and lava was most likely active at the time they were built, could they have been used as a channel to direct the lava away from other important structures? With lava periodically flowing over the sides of the domes to create fields of cooling molten stone, it's possible that these walls were created to prevent the fumes and devastating effects of the lava from the fields, which are teeming with archaeological remains. With some of the stone walls buried beneath the lava flows, it is obvious they are quite old. And since they are not high enough to restrain livestock, researchers will need to excavate and see if there's anything else below the shifting sands and rubble to determine their origin. Strange Siberian Figurine. You might not expect a 5,000-year-old figurine from a prehistoric culture to be discovered in a field in Siberia, but in 2017 a puzzling discovery was made of a strange figure. Discovered at a prehistoric burial site, the figurine is of what researchers believe could be a deity wearing possibly a halo. Made from an unknown organic material, the interesting relic was found in an old potato field where Neolithic and late Bronze Age settlements were discovered. The reason why the figurine is so interesting is that feathered headgear isn't familiar to archaeological sites in ancient Siberia. They are more common in the Middle East and from 1,000 to 2,000 years later than the site where it was located. But the feathered headdress figurine is not the only interesting find made in the potato field. Another figurine of a bird made from bone, as well as anthropomorphic figurines made from mammoth tusks, were also discovered there. Other figurines of a moose made from shell were also unearthed, and the fact that the smaller figurines had holes in them led researchers to believe they were sewn onto clothes of their original owners. Belt buckles made from bone and small sculptures were also found by archaeologists on some of the male burials. The site is believed to be dated to the 3rd millennium BCE, but some of the stone implements found there from the Neolithic age could be as old as the 4th millennium BCE. Experts believe the main ancient burial ground was from the Kratovo culture from the Middle Bronze Age, but researchers need more time to assess the location to determine its true origin. Could you imagine aliens finding your action figures or dolls buried in a field 5,000 years from now? What other weird stuff do you think future archaeologists might find from our society that will make them scratch their heads? Let me know in the comments below, then be sure to subscribe if you haven't already so you can stay up to date with all these awesome videos. Petroglyphs in India. Archaeologists were understandably excited at the discovery of rock carvings believed to be tens of thousands of years old in India's western state of Maharashtra. Known as petroglyphs, the rock carvings were discovered on hills in the Konkan region. Etched on the rocky, flat hilltops, the carvings have gone unnoticed for thousands of years, and with thousands of the carvings discovered, archaeologists have a number of clues to sift through. Hidden beneath layers of soil and mud, the carvings are believed to be holy and worshipped by locals in some areas. With animals, birds, human figures, and geometrical designs all depicted, they are stunningly similar to petroglyphs found in other parts of the world from prehistoric cultures. Archaeologists believe they could have been created about 10,000 BC, and with petroglyphs found in 52 villages in the area, the race is on to study and preserve them. Believed to have been created by a hunter-gatherer community, none of the pictures detail any farming activities but instead show hunted animals. With so many familiar animals including sharks and whales as well as amphibians and turtles, surprisingly none of the petroglyphs depict any animals like hippos or rhinoceroses. The question remains then, who created them, and were they indigenous people, or did they come from another place? Luckily, the state government set aside a fund of $3.2 million to further study hundreds of the identified petroglyphs, with the hopes that these petroglyphs will shed some light on India's ancient peoples. Utah's cryptica cave paintings. After spending most of his life moving cattle through a remote valley in Utah, a man named Waldo Wilcox decided to sell his property back to the state. In doing so, it allowed archaeologists to visit the strange site, and they ended up finding extensive ruins that were so well preserved they offered a glimpse into the state's past. After setting up a research camp, scientists set out to excavate the site at Range Creek, uncovering a plethora of archaeological riches that the eccentric landowner guarded for decades. Traces of the largest villages were found on the canyon floor that indicated a flourishing settlement once located there, with pit houses and granaries that were built high into the cliffs that may have been used as a defensive retreat. By being able to excavate the location at Range Creek, researchers hope to find why farming suddenly halted across much of the Southwest 7 centuries ago. As tribes abandoned their ancestral pueblos, experts believe that warfare, drought, disease, and religious upheaval might have caused the exodus. But in researching the ranch, they found petroglyphs, granaries with corn cobs 1,000 years old, and intact pit houses that gave a unique snapshot at the enigmatic Fremont people, who were mobile hunters and farmers who lived in Utah from around AD 200 to 1300 before they disappeared completely. Located up a rutted logging road that curves 4,000 feet, 1,250 meters along sheer cliffs, the site has hundreds of granaries that range from cabinet size to several yards across, and some that are so high in the cliffs they are only visible with binoculars. Located within juniper and sage groves, a large indented stone known as a medet that was used to grind corn and seed was also found there. With so many granaries, an archaeologist excavating the site calculated that some housed hundreds of bushels of maize. Imagine the original people that lived on this land who would have to have made hundreds of trips climbing the sheer cliffs loaded with baskets on their back. Unfortunately, the site also holds a bit of controversy. When the news media first started covering the Range Creek story, local tribes such as the Northern Ute, who claim affiliation to the Fremont, were angry that archaeologists had not told them anything about the site. As researchers and tribal leaders squared off over who held the rights to the archaeological finds on the site, the debate over human remains that have been found on the site flared up too. So far, 5 sets of human remains have been found either on the ranch property or nearby, and although local tribes have been notified, researchers have not touched the remains. But the real mystery of the site is the fact that around 1350 AD, all physical remainders or ties to the Fremont people, including their distinctive sandals, baskets, and pottery, disappeared from the archaeological record. So did the Fremont people move on from this location? Some scientists have uncovered potential evidence of Fremont hearths in dwellings in northwestern Colorado. It's possible the hunter-gatherers moved on to more fruitful lands, but until researchers can continue to excavate the site, its treasures hidden underground will remain puzzle pieces that scientists cannot yet put back together. Ukraine's crab-like ancient site. A mysterious earthwork structure known as Moridius Square was discovered in the village in Ukraine. Unusually shaped, the mysterious structure looks like a giant crab or spider. At its center, there is a huge circle with a deep basin, which has 3 openings cut into the walls of the circle at the northeast, the west, and the southern side. Extending out from the center circle, there are 4 extensive earthen ramps that lead in curvy lines to smaller sections in the basin, believed to have been used for ritualistic events. With one of the ramps measuring 213 feet long, this gives you an idea of the scope of the circular structure, which is believed to measure 131 feet, 40 meters in diameter at the top of the basin. The first studies of the site were carried out in 1987 by an archaeologist. In 2001, the second group of researchers flew over the square in hang gliders to get an aerial view of the structure. It was not until 2004 when archaeological excavations were conducted around the square and 5 burial grounds were excavated that dated to the end of the 4th millennium BC. Skeletons found in the burials belonged to the Indo-European community, leading researchers to suggest that Moridius Square was built by them as a temple to pray to and sacrifice to their gods. Because the sun sets in the center of one of the valleys of Moridius Square on the day of the vernal equinox, they also believe it could have been used as an astronomical observatory. Some also suggest that Moridius Square could have been built by the Cossacks as a defense structure, which would have helped them protect themselves from raids by Turks. One of the more interesting features of the site is the fact that it acts as a magnificent amplifier of sound. If you were to stand in the basin of the center of the site and whisper, whatever you say would be heard clearly at the top of the structure without a microphone. Perhaps the structure of the basin, which resembles a deep bowl, was used by the original peoples to transmit sounds that way. It would have made for a stunning setting during rituals. The design of the site, though, still raises some questions. Why was it built in the shape of a crab? Some believe that it could have been constructed at the time when the sun was in the constellation of Cancer, which would actually put it at being built in 8305 BC. Rare female mummy. It is not often that international media gets a front row seat at the opening of an ancient sarcophagus, but in 2018, Egyptian officials opened an ancient tomb that was found in Luxor, revealing a well-preserved female mummy believed to be more than 3,000 years old. Located in one of two separate coffins found in the same tomb in an Egyptian necropolis on the west bank of the Nile, the woman was found inside a tomb that dates to Egypt's Middle Kingdom nearly 4,000 years ago. Located within the same tomb, a mummy in the second sarcophagus was a priest that was known to have survived the embalming of several pharaohs. The necropolis is located between the royal tombs in the Valley of the Queens and the Valley of the Kings, and it took 5 months to clear 1,000 feet, 300 meters of rubble to uncover the tomb. But the sarcophagi were not the only treasures to be found. The tomb's owner and his family members were depicted in vividly colored paintings on the ceiling. There were also other mummies, skeletons, and skulls, as well as 1,000 statuettes made from wood and clay. Xshaped tomb. A tomb recently discovered in China had a curious shape that any gamers will know very well. The mysterious X-shaped tomb looked strikingly similar to the Xbox logo. Originally believed to have been posted as a marketing stunt, the tomb actually belongs to the Chinese Qin dynasty, who ruled from 221 BC to 206 BC, considered the first dynasty of imperial China. The first emperor of a unified China, Qin Shi Huang, became China's first emperor when he was 38 after he conquered all of the other warring states. During his reign, the size of the Chinese state expanded. Known for banning and burning books and executing scholars, the emperor is said to have feared death and tried to seek out a fabled elixir of life that would help him to live forever. Obsessed with acquiring immortality, he is said to have fallen prey to many who offered him supposed elixirs that never worked. Could this temple have been used in his search for immortality? It probably was not used as his burial tomb, as the emperor is actually buried deep under a hill in central China surrounded by an underground moat of poisonous mercury. Qin Shi Huang is well known for more than 8,000 clay soldiers found by farmers in 1974 who were digging wells near Xi'an, China. Life-size terracotta soldiers, an army of thousands, each had unique clothing, hair, and facial features. One can't help but wonder what mysterious relics are just waiting to be unearthed from the strange X-shaped temple. Which of these discoveries got your mind racing the most? From terrifying grimoires full of mystical spells to books overflowing with demonic power, here are 10 magic books that promise powers. The Sacred Magic of Abramelin the Mage. The Book of Abramelin the Mage was written in the 15th century. It is one of the most popular mystical grimoires of Kabbalistic knowledge ever produced. The fellow who wrote it was named Abraham von Worms, and he was a Jewish traveler who supposedly encountered an eccentric magician named Abramelin during a trip to Egypt. The writings inside the Book of Abramelin the Mage talk about the passing of Abraham's knowledge to his son Lamech, and talks about how he came by such mystical knowledge in the first place. The story of Abraham's life is pretty complicated. The book says that he studied under a rabbi named Moses, then did some extensive traveling, and eventually ended up in Egypt where he met Abramelin the Mage. The Mage was Egyptian and lived in the desert outside a small town. The Mage then taught Abraham all the magic knowledge he knew and gave him 2 manuscripts so that he could write his own book. While there's a lot going on in this book, way too much to talk about, the most elaborate ritual that promises to give you power is known as the Abramelin Operation. This ritual is said to allow any skilled mage to gain the knowledge of his guardian angel. In the book, it discourages women from undertaking this ritual because of, in its own words, their curiosity and love of talk. However, the good news was that if you were a virgin female, it was okay to undertake the ritual. Obviously, it was the 15th century and things were a bit different. If you do manage to complete the 18-month ritual of prayer and purification, you will then be in touch with your holy guardian angel, and that angel will grant you a wealth of powers such as necromancy and divination. The Sworn Book of Honorius. The Sworn Book of Honorius is another ancient grimoire, this one coming to us from the medieval period. This book is supposedly filled with all kinds of ritual magic and is rumored to have been made by someone named Honorius of Thebes, an extremely mysterious figure who has never been positively identified. Inside the book, you'll find quite a bit of criticism against the Catholic Church, which the book claims has been corrupted by the devil, and that the Church's ultimate goal is to doom humanity by completely abolishing the practice of magic. Like most grimoires of the time, this book focuses on summoning angels and demons and other spirits, and if you manage to summon one of them, you will definitely be given a wealth of great abilities ranging from the power to cause floods to destroy an entire kingdom. One of the most malicious spells in this book is one that promises to cast a sickness under someone of your choosing. While it's unlikely any of these spells work, anyone with any success should definitely leave a comment. As a side note, if you wish to be a practitioner who uses this book, there are a few rules. First, if you cannot find a worthy magician to pass along your knowledge to, you must take the book to your grave. Also, this is a men's only club. The men who want to use this book are not allowed the company of women, so keep that in mind before performing one of these occult rituals. Are you interested in practicing magic and witchcraft? What is your experience with it? Let me know in the comments below, then be sure to subscribe if you haven't already, and turn on notifications so you don't miss any new videos. The Greek Magical Papyri. The Greek Magical Papyri is extremely old. It comes from the 2nd century BC and is a list of spells, rituals, and divinations. Included within the list are detailed instructions for how to summon your own personal headless demon, how to burst open the doors to the underworld, and how to protect yourself in the case of an attack from a wild beast. And just like almost every other magical text, this one promises you a way to gain a supernatural slave, kinda like a genie from another world that will do your bidding. There is one exceptional ceremony which will allow you to ascend the 7 higher planes of existence so that you can communicate with the ancient deity known as Mithras. This is not actually one book, but a series of ancient archives that have been collected through the years. Each papyrus in the series was written between 100 BC and 400 BC, with most of them appearing through the 1700s and 1800s through underground antique sales. They have survived inside various European collections and can even be found at the British Museum or at the Louvre in Paris. In any case, the magical texts are believed to have been written by members of the Egyptian priesthood during the last decline of the Egyptian temple infrastructure, back when Egypt was tied tightly to Greece. One of the most important texts inside the Greek magical papyri is known as the Mithras liturgy. It was first translated in 1903 and is based on the complex invocation of Helios Mithras, the god who will offer the revelation of immortality. Lesser Key of Solomon. The Lesser Key of Solomon is an anonymous grimoire from the 17th century but was published in English in 1904 by Aleister Crowley, who you might remember as being kind of a crazy person. Crowley tried to start his own religion. He participated in some of the most profane acts a person can, and it's even believed that he committed murder. It's hard to take anything this psycho wrote seriously, but this is definitely a magic book that promises power. The modern version contains all of Crowley's original comments, and there are descriptions and directions for the invocation of approximately 72 demons and spirits from the original texts. Crowley was hell-bent on figuring out how to interpret ancient magic to literally bring demons to life. He participated in his own outlandish rituals and had a small cult of followers. Surprisingly, you can actually purchase this book at Barnes & Noble's online website. On their site, they describe this book as a magic grimoire with portions that can be traced back to the 16th and 17th century, with a lot of inspiration from ancient occult researchers. There are several modern editions of this grimoire, but the original source material contained 5 different books. Crowley's version is only an interpretation of the first book, Ars Goetia. The Black Pullet. The Black Pullet is a little different. Instead of coming from ancient Greece or ancient Egypt, this book dates back to France in the early 18th century. The book focuses on the study of magical talismans, which are believed to be special objects engraved with words of power that can protect and strengthen the person who wears them. To this day, it's believed that the Black Pullet was written by an unnamed officer in the army of Napoleon, who supposedly received the contents of the book from a mysterious mage while the army was stationed in Egypt. Inside this book, you will find detailed instructions for how to construct magical talismans from bronze, silk, and ink. There are also invocations inside the book, which one of the more interesting being a spell that is supposedly able to summon a djinn, which is basically a genie made of smoke and fire, who can perform magic at your command. But if you have a little bit more evil in you, the book also shows how to make a talisman for yourself that will force men to tell you their secrets, that will let you see behind closed doors, and that will automatically destroy any person who might be plotting against you. Sounds pretty handy. The Satanic Bible. It's a little funny that the Satanic Bible is such a new book. It was written only 50 years ago by Anton Szandor LaVey from the United States. Anton was an author and musician, and through his writing, he managed to create his own religion that still exists today. It should be no surprise that over the last 50 years, the Satanic Bible has drawn a whole lot of criticism. Most people think that anyone who reads the book is a lunatic Satanist who performs violent rituals and tries to summon demons. And while a lot of Satanists dispute the claim, saying that the Church of Satan is all about promoting atheism and libertarian ideas about being free to indulge and being happy with yourself, there is no denying the actual contents of the Satanic Bible. In an in-depth report from The Independent, they describe some of the main rules of Satanism. One of the rules says, if a guest in your lair annoys you, treat him cruelly and without mercy, while other rules say things like not to harm children, not to kill animals unless you need them for food, and not to bother anyone when walking in open territory. However, the same rule says that if someone bothers you in open territory and does not stop, you are free to destroy them. Inside the Satanic Bible is the Book of Belial, which is a list of rituals and magic, mostly stolen from other work, such as Crowley's Magic Elementary Theory. Many of the rituals promise to improve health, intelligence, and to go so far as destroy another person. The Galdrabach. The Galdrabach is an Icelandic grimoire from the 16th century that contains a collection of 47 spells collected by a variety of magicians. The spells inside the book rely heavily on staves, which were extremely popular in Icelandic magic at that time. Staves are basically runes. They come equipped with magical properties and can give the wearer special powers. Some staves written about in this book promise to help you attract the favor of powerful men, to inspire fear in your enemies, and to even put people to sleep. Runes are probably the most misunderstood form of magic in the world, as they are heavily displayed in any Vikings program on TV and a lot in video games. And of course, this book is full of special spells that can remedy all kinds of afflictions, such as tiredness, headaches, insomnia, and difficulty with childbirth. One of the most hilarious spells is number 46, which is known as the Flatulence Rune. This stave will strike your enemy with horrendously bad gas. They'll get gas so bad that the gas will never stop. But this is nothing compared to spell 27, which when drawn on someone's food will make them incredibly sick. And if you want to prevent unwanted visitors from coming to your house, there are also special staves and runes for that. It's like a spell cookbook. The False Hierarchy of Demons, Pseudomonarchia Daemonum. The Pseudomonarchia Daemonum is better known as the False Hierarchy of Demons, and it's probably the most extensive catalog of demons ever created. It was created by a famous demonologist named Johann Weyer in the 16th century. It's believed that Johann was inspired by the German occultist Heinrich Cornelius Agrippa. Inside this book, you will find a detailed list of all 69 noble demons. They're all reported to be prominent members of Hell's monarchy. It details the specialties of each demon, how exactly to conjure them, and what you can get out of the deal. It's basically the Wikipedia of demons. One of the main differences with this book is that its author was a devout Christian. He actually warned people about trying to conjure demons from hell with extreme caution. Some details are omitted from the rituals in this book to try and stop people from recklessly summoning demons. Some of the demons discussed in the book include Shax, who was fond of stealing horses and robbing people's eyesight and hearing. Then there is Eligos, who was able to see the future of wars and also the fates of the soldiers. The Voyage Manuscript. The Voyage Manuscript is one of the most mysterious books ever found. Its origins are absolutely baffling. The book was first discovered in 1912, but it was originally written in the 15th century. This book is full of handwriting in a language that not a single person has ever been able to decode or understand. Then there are the dozens and dozens of illustrations with strange pictures of what appear to be alien plants, bizarre objects, symbols of the zodiac, and even naked people. It's absolutely boggled people for over a century, with many claiming that the book holds secret cosmic powers that, if decoded, could change the world. However, a history researcher named Nicholas Gibbs claims to have cracked the code. He made the claim in 2017 after discovering that the book is probably a guide to women's health and nothing more. He also claims that the writings were probably plagiarized from other such writings of the 15th century. Nicholas was commissioned by a certain television network to analyze the manuscript back in 2014. Because of his extensive familiarity with Latin and ancient medieval texts, he actually managed to figure out what was going on in the of pages, and so his claim is that the book is nothing more than a plagiarized script for how women can take care of their bodies using medicinal herbs and plants. The reason the book is full of zodiac symbols is because people back then believed certain cures worked better under certain astrological signs. Could this be the truth of the Voyage Manuscript, or is this guy just a lunatic? Picatrix. Our final magical grimoire is Picatrix, and it dates back to the 11th century. This is probably the biggest book on the list. It was originally written in Arabic and has 400 pages dedicated to astrological magic and astrological theory. There are spells and incantations designed to channel the energies of the planets and the stars to grant the wielder ultimate power and enlightenment. However, this book is more like a disgusting cookbook. It's full of recipes that will probably ruin your day. The book is notorious for the foul ingredients that go into its magic recipes. Most of the concoctions are designed to give you an altered state of consciousness and even an experience kinda like modern drugs. Most of the ingredients include blood, brain matter, opium, psychoactive plants, hashish, and bodily excretions. For example, if you want to have power over the dead, you need blood, spit, earwax, tears, urine, and more disturbing substances. Oh yes, and you need to drink it. Would you be willing to try this recipe to get some control over the dead? I sure wouldn't. Do you believe in any of these magical scripts? From mean marine reptiles to modern day monsters that are still around, here are 10 sea creatures scarier than the mighty and terrifying Megalodon. Chronosaurus. The Chronosaurus was one of the meanest marine reptiles to ever roam the seas. This was one of the deadliest apex predators during the early Cretaceous period, totally ravaging other sea creatures in its endless search for food. The Chronosaurus was actually named after the Greek titan Kronos, father of Zeus. The Chronosaurus was first discovered from a single jawbone and some teeth in northeastern Australia in 1899, nowhere near Greece or its old legends. Chronosaurus fossils were also discovered in Colombia, a country well known for its heaps of prehistoric snakes, turtles, and crocodiles. You can visit an actual Chronosaurus skeleton at the Harvard Museum of Natural History in Cambridge, Massachusetts. The skeleton measures 40 feet from the tip of its tail to the tip of its nose. However, the skeleton is a bit misleading. Whoever put it together added way too many vertebrae, making the Chronosaurus look much larger than it actually was. The real Chronosaurus was only about 33 feet long, 10 meters. I say only pretty loosely. But that is still incredibly big and monstrous. An average shark is only around 10 feet, 3 meters long. The Chronosaurus definitely could have given the Megalodon a fight for its money. This thing lived all over the world. It feasted wherever it wanted, and there have been other sea monsters found with the bite marks of a Chronosaurus on their skull, specifically a Plesiosaur found in Australia. The Chronosaurus was a gigantic cross between a shark and a crocodile, and you would have been a tasty snack for this prehistoric predator. Helvetosaurus. The Helvetosaurus was another savage lizard from 200 million years ago, and it's the stuff of nightmares. It was first discovered in Switzerland in 1933. It dates back to the Triassic period, and it is a reptile with a small head and extremely long arms. It looks like a strange mixture between lizard and seal. In fact, this monster looked like something from a gruesome horror film. Even though it would have never actually met the Megalodon face to face, the two could have been bitter enemies. This beast is about 6.5 feet, 2 meters long from snout to tail, making it not overly large but still big enough to put up a decent fight. In any case, this was not a reptile you would want to meet in person. With its short, square head and sharp teeth, the Helvetosaurus was a force to be feared. It would have looked kind of like a Komodo dragon, only meaner and more agile underwater. Imagine a seal with long arms and the head of a dinosaur. Tyrannoneustis. Tyrannoneustis is not the same as the Tyrannosaurus rex. In some ways, it's scarier. It was first discovered over 100 years ago sitting in the Oxford Clay Formation, a soil sediment in England that dates back to the Jurassic period. The fossil was actually locked away in storage in the Hunterian Museum in Glasgow, and it sat there for over a century collecting dust until it was re-examined in early 2013. The new studies revealed that the Tyrannoneustis was actually one of the oldest species of marine crocodile. After they put the skeleton together, they ended up naming it the Tyrannoneustis lythrodecticos, which translates to tyrant swimmer. This beast has also been nicknamed the T-Rex of the sea. As you can imagine, this was one scary carnivore floating throughout the ocean. It actually looked like a crocodile and dolphin hybrid, like an enormous dolphin with a mouth full of crocodile teeth. Unfortunately, there is not too much that is really known about these monsters or how they operated in the ocean. The best description is part crocodile, part dolphin, and part shark. It had 4 limbs with webbed toes just like a modern croc, but on its tail was a fin that looked like that of a modern-day shark. Many researchers believe the Tyrannosaurus was actually the first super predator able to hunt and kill prey much larger than itself. This is extremely impressive considering the Tyrannosaurus was typically around 30 feet 9 meters long. I wouldn't feel safe going for a dip in the ocean with these evil-looking monsters around, would you? Let me know which beast is your favorite, and be sure to subscribe if you haven't already. Tanus. The Tanus was a terrifying sea monster with an extraordinarily long neck. It was about 3 times the length of a human, with most of its body made up of its giant neck. Think about an underwater giraffe. In fact, the neck of this Triassic reptile is so ludicrously long that it has confused paleontologists for nearly 170 years. But recently, researchers used CAT scans to fully understand the remains of this reptile and answer some of their questions. A typical Tanus was about 16 feet in length, with its tail making up about 1/3 of its body, the body itself making up about 1/4, and its neck taking up the rest. According to a paleontologist from Chicago's Field Museum, the Tanus looked like a stubby crocodile with an incredibly long neck. Researchers don't understand why the reptile evolved with such strange dimensions, making it part lizard and part snake, but there is no mistaking how terrifying this thing would be to encounter in the ocean. With a neck roughly 10 feet, 3 meters in length, it could probably strike at you from a healthy distance. You might try to run, but it would be awfully hard to get away from this villain. It probably could not fight a megalodon head-to-head, but it's definitely just as scary as one. Leopluradon. The Leopluradon is one of the most famous extinct marine reptiles thanks to its appearance on the show Walking with Dinosaurs. If you haven't heard of this incredibly scary extinct reptile, let me give you some impressive facts. First, this reptile comes from the Mesozoic era. Its name translates into English meaning smooth-sided teeth. This is a little misleading since the Leopluradon was one of the most voracious predators of its time, competing with such beasts as the Chronosaurus. While the Leopluradon was first depicted as being over 80 feet, 25 meters long back on BBC in the 1990s, it's actually closer to about 30 feet, 9 meters. But that does not make it any less of a monster. It was the apex predator of late Jurassic Europe. This is because Europe 150 million years ago was covered by a shallow body of water, and that is where this giant beast lived, gobbling fish, squids, and smaller reptiles just like a hungry hippopotamus or a crocodile. Only this one was much, much larger. Blue whale. A lot of people underestimate the blue whale, which is the largest animal to ever exist on planet Earth. Sure, the megalodon was one scary monster, but the blue whale is a terrifying beast, and it's still alive. It doesn't look inherently scary. It looks pretty calm, actually, floating around in the water with its giant mouth and huge eyes. It doesn't have fangs, it's got no scales, but it can swallow a boat by simply opening its mouth. If you ask me, that is pretty scary. The blue whale is the largest animal currently in existence, and so far as scientists have discovered, nothing has ever beaten it in sheer size. We like to marvel at the dinosaurs, but the blue whale is actually bigger than any dinosaur that ever existed. Yes, the megalodon reached about 58 feet, 18 meters in length, but the blue whale typically measures about 100 feet, 30 meters in length. That's right, over double the size of a megalodon. The blue whale is also over 3 times larger than most of the prehistoric reptiles we are talking about on this list. To put its size into perspective, a blue whale's tongue weighs about as much as a fully grown African elephant. Its heart is the size of a car, its eye is the size of a basketball, and a small child could literally swim through its arteries like a white blood cell swims through your bloodstream. If that is not intimidating, you haven't really thought about meeting a blue whale. What do you think? Would you be scared of a giant blue whale if you encountered one? They can ram ships and have even sunk wooden boats in centuries past. Let me know if you think you'd be up for it in the comments section below. The Kraken. The Kraken has been a legendary sea creature basically since the beginning of time. For as long as men have built boats and sailed the ocean, they have been terrified of the great and cruel Kraken. It has long been a legend to scare fishermen and inspire terror in anyone brave enough to venture across the sea. However, there is no actual Kraken hiding beneath the waves. There is, however, a giant squid. And you bet the giant squid is far more terrifying than a mere 58-foot shark. There's nothing scarier than 10 wet arms reaching out of the darkness to ensnare you. Being drawn into the insect-like face of the giant squid, then being consumed by its horrifying beak. That's right, giant squids have beaks, kind of like birds, only much bigger. They can grow to be about 45 feet long and have eyes even bigger than those of a blue whale. Why? Scientists believe that they have evolved to spot whales coming from a huge distance away, according to the BBC. The giant squid attacks horizontally, then wraps its tentacles around its prey much in the same way that a python will coil around the body of its victim. Basically, you would be suffocated by a 45-foot-long kraken with 10 arms and hundreds of gross suckers. I think I'd rather be eaten by a shark or swallowed by a whale. For me, this is the scariest animal to encounter in the wild, but what do you think? Plesiosaurus. The Plesiosaurus was another terrifying reptile from the Jurassic period, existing around the same time as the deadly Chronosaurus. The Plesiosaurus looked a little like an overgrown sea turtle with the neck of a brontosaurus and the head teeth of a T-Rex. This was one of the scariest beasts of its time and was located all over the globe. The first fossil was discovered in 1821, but since then, there have been many discoveries. And even though this marine turtle serpent was only around 11 feet, 3.5 meters long, it was still pretty intimidating. A lot of people actually associate the Plesiosaurus with the Loch Ness Monster, claiming that the two must be related, but this is simply not true in any sense. The Plesiosaurus lived 228 million years ago and went extinct no less than 61 million years ago. It was also a voracious carnivore, and it's highly doubtful that any massive carnivore like that could survive in small Loch Ness. What would it eat? It would simply go hungry. Mosasaurus. The Mosasaurus was made famous in the most recent Jurassic Park film, and as far as all the sea creatures in the animal kingdom go, the Mosasaurus is actually the only one that really rivals the Megalodon in terms of size and aggression. This was a seriously mean monster, like a cross between a crocodile and a shark. It had double-hinged jaws so that it could feed on other marine reptiles and even great white sharks. A Mosasaurus was 55 feet, 17 meters in length, and weighed about 28 tons. It could have swallowed a great white shark like you or I could swallow a jelly bean. If one of these reptiles got into a fight with a prehistoric megalodon, the winner would be anyone's guess. Scientists believe that mosasaurs could not haul themselves onto land to lay their eggs like giant sea turtles, and so they kept their eggs inside them until they hatched, at which point they gave birth to a whole brood of young mosasaurs able to swim immediately. Now that's scary, but the next animal might be even scarier. Be sure to subscribe for more awesome content and give this video a thumbs up if you liked it. Also, what do you think? Which is the scariest creature discussed today in your opinion? Who would win in a giant brawl between all of these marine megafauna? Let me know in the comments below. Helicoprion. The Helicoprion was one of the most disturbing animals ever to live. Everyone probably remembers the horrifying ghost shark or the even more disturbing goblin shark. Well, the Helicoprion was an even freakier type of fish from 270 million years ago. Its jaw was the thing of nightmares, looking more like a saw blade than an actual mouth. Its fossil was first found in Kazakhstan, and because the fossil looked like a spiral, the fish was immediately named Helicoprion, which means spiral saw. Its lower jaw consisted of a tooth whorl. As the shark grew older, smaller teeth were moved deeper into the center of the whorl, while larger teeth grew on the outside. This created a saw blade effect inside of the shark's mouth. And if its weird teeth weren't frightening enough, this shark grew to be around 35 to 40 feet long, making it one of the biggest sea monsters of its day. One bite from this evil creature would turn anyone into mincemeat. Terrifying. From World War I submarines fighting giant sea serpents to the real-life inspiration for the famous novel Moby Dick, here are 10 times sea monsters attacked ships. The German U-boat. In 2016, workers who were laying cables on the seabed to help survey the seafloor came upon the wreckage of a German U-boat which had sunk almost 100 years ago. This occurred off the southwest coast of Scotland, and it is quite an exciting discovery, especially for the Scottish engineers who found it. There are even sonar images showing this missing World War I submarine sitting off the coast of Galloway, badly damaged. Experts believe the vessel could be the UB-85, a German submarine sunk in 1918. But this is no ordinary shipwreck. In a report by CBC News, they detail how naval folklore suggests that the crashed vessel could have been attacked by a sea monster. This is because the submarine was initially caught by the British HMS Coreopsis in April of 1918 when they found the submarine floating along the surface of the water in the middle of the day. The German crew surrendered with almost no resistance, and when the captain was questioned, he told the British men that a beast with huge eyes set inside of a horny skull attacked their boat from the water. The Germans described it as a strange beast with teeth that could be seen glistening in the moonlight. Apparently, the Germans fired at the beast until it fell back into the sea, but after the attack, the submarine was so badly damaged that they could not submerge again. And so they were captured by the British, and all thanks to a mysterious sea monster with supposed teeth and horns. Does this seem plausible to you? It seems more like a blue whale than anything else to me, but who knows the truth? Only those unfortunate sailors. Let me know what you think in the comments section below. While you're down there, give this video a thumbs up and remember to subscribe if you haven't already. There are loads of fact-filled videos coming out all the time and you won't want to miss any of them. Killer Walrus. What are these beings that take down ships? Sea monsters may be out there, but the real truth is that most boats are inadvertently attacked by whales or other large animals. For example, in 2019, a walrus attacked and destroyed a Russian tugboat. This is according to local news reports and a report by Live Science. While the Russian Navy vessel floated through Arctic waters, a giant mother walrus who was just defending her babies attacked the Russian tugboat with brute force. The walrus was so relentless in its attack that it actually sunk the tugboat by using its impressive strength and huge tusks. Luckily, the researchers and crew of the boat made it ashore without incident, but their boat was not so lucky. The walrus was a real tough mama. This is probably the last time those Russians will try messing around near an ornery walrus, and let this be a lesson to everyone about how dangerous an angry walrus can be, especially when it's a mother with babies to defend. Great white shark boat attack. Sometimes it's hard to say if a sea creature tried to attack a boat on purpose or if it was just an accident. A recent event in Australia shows just this exact thing and proves how dangerous a rampaging beast from below the sea can be when it comes at your boat. A father and son were absolutely stunned when their boat was attacked by a great white shark. This wasn't the movie Jaws, this was real life, with a life or death struggle between one of the largest creatures in the ocean and a few unlucky people on board. They even captured video of the occurrence with a huge beast very clearly ramming their boat and nearly causing it to capsize. From the looks of it, this was a very chilling encounter, and nobody knows if the animal in question was angry or if it was just an accident. And while it looks like a great white shark trying to bite through the side of their boat, it also could have been a killer whale. Nobody really knows for sure, though it looks a lot more like a shark than a whale. Those on the boat sped up and got away, just as a giant fin slapped the waves and then vanished into the ocean. They probably brought a few harpoon guns before they took another chance in the open sea again. Gangs of killer whales. In the Salish Sea near Washington State's San Juan Islands, gangs of killer whales are terrorizing fishermen. These killer whales wait patiently all day for a fisherman to catch a whole bunch of halibut, then rob them absolutely blind. The killer whales attack individual fishing boats in gangs, stalking them so ferociously that the fishermen are sometimes forced to retreat back to the port. This comes after decades of a fragile coexistence between the whales and the fishermen. However, the killer whales have been coming back in record numbers to attack boats and run off with all the fish they can handle. Even with fishermen using special electronic noisemakers to prevent the attacks, the animals simply ignore them. Some fishermen claim that as many as 40 whales will surround a boat and then bully it until they can get the fish from the fishermen's nets. According to an article from the National Post, some of the fishermen claim the situation is out of control. While no boats have been horribly damaged, it is a frightening occurrence to have 40 whales trying to steal your fish. It's basically like bandit gangs of killer whales terrorizing the ocean. They are whale pirates. What would you do if you were on a fishing boat and suddenly found yourself surrounded by killer whales? Is there even a way to fight back? Are you doomed to lose your catch to these predators? Let me know what you'd do in a comment. Giant squid attacks yacht. A report from 2003 claims that a French yacht in the middle of a trip around the world was attacked by a giant squid. According to the veteran yachtsman who had been on board at the time, the boat started randomly encountering strange vibrations. The captain then sent one of the crew members below deck to see what was wrong, and the crew member was absolutely shocked to find tentacles surrounding him. A giant squid had attached itself to the bottom of their yacht and seemed to be trying to pull them down into the murky depths. The squid could be seen behind their boat clinging to it as if it wanted to eat it. With 40 years of yachting experience, the veteran yachtsman claimed that he had never seen anything like it. The crew member who spotted the squid through the porthole claimed that the tentacles were as big as his arm, and they were latched onto the ship. Luckily for them, the squid eventually let go and drifted back into the ocean. The witnesses claimed it could have been about 30 feet, 9 meters long, which would make it only half of its maximum length. This is an incredible encounter because of how rare giant squids are, with only about 250 official sightings ever recorded. This has to be one of the scariest things I could imagine. A giant squid slowly pulling my boat under the waves? Absolute insanity. The history of sea monsters. We have an incredibly long history of believing in sea monsters, but where did all this craziness come from? Are there any actual stories of legitimate sea monsters terrorizing the old world? There are definitely exaggerated stories from sailors, but when did all this start happening? The first definitive proof of the existence of a giant sea monster happened in 1861 when a sea captain named Frederick Boyer stumbled upon a massive giant squid in the Atlantic Ocean and tried to catch the beast using harpoons. Of course he failed, but he did manage to catch a small piece of the squid, which he brought back to Paris. But the legend of the mythical Kraken goes way before that, when the Bishop of Bergen wrote the book Natural History of Norway back in 1752. In the book, he described the Kraken as being a beast, a full 1.5 miles in length, or 2.4 kilometers. Still, the legend goes back even further in time. It also seems like the further back in time we go, the larger the Kraken becomes. Of course, the Greek mythology includes the sea monsters Scylla and Charybdis in the famous Odyssey story by the poet Homer. These creatures were known to rip apart ships and eat sailors, and were described as a six-headed monster and a giant insatiable whirlpool. Even more extreme, in Nordic and Icelandic sagas from the 13th century, the great monster of the sea was told to be the size of a whole island and swallowed men, boats, and whales indiscriminately. Could this island-sized monster have just gone extinct? Are its bones lying on the bottom of the ocean somewhere, or is it all just a myth? Let me know what you think. Post a comment with your opinion down below. Sperm whales versus fishing boats. Sperm whales are some of the biggest creatures on Earth and are the largest of all the toothed whales. In fact, they are the largest living predators with teeth on the planet, growing to be about 70 feet, 20.5 meters in length and weighing 63 tons. Obviously, these are some seriously formidable whales. Their primary diet consists of giant squid, which is lucky for humans, but that doesn't mean they can't attack a boat every now and again. Back in the whaling days, sperm whales were some of the most hunted animals on the planet. However, they never went down without a fight. Sperm whales have been known to sink entire ships. There is even one instance in which an angry sperm whale rammed into and sank the Nantucket whale ship Essex, which is believed to be the inspiration for Herman Melville's novel Moby Dick. And while this might be partly the inspiration for his novel, there was another even more legendary real-life whale that took many years to hunt down and cost many sailors their lives in the process. More on that later. Attack of the needlefish. How would you like to be speared through the neck by an angry needlefish? No, neither would I. But Mohammed Idul, a 16-year-old boy, narrowly survived after he was attacked on his boat by a needlefish. According to a report by the New York Post, Mohammed was fishing with his family in Southeast Asia when a school of needlefish began jumping out of the water. Unluckily, they started attacking the boat, and one of the needlefish actually jumped out of the water, sailed through the air, and stabbed the poor young boy straight through his throat with its long snout, thereby knocking the young boy into the water. Could you imagine? That seems like something out of a horror movie. I would lose my mind if I saw something like this actually happen. This is an incident of accidental impalement by fish, and it's not really something that happens often. Fish don't typically attack boats, and in essence, this wasn't even really much of a serious motivated attack, more of a school of fish jumping through the water. This poor young boy just happened to be standing in the wrong place at the wrong time. Fortunately, he survived and is in excellent health, though I don't think he's getting on a boat again anytime soon. Giant octopus in Manhattan. In Manhattan, there stands a statue in memorial of the tragedy of a giant octopus swallowing a ferry. That's right, there is a monument in New York honoring the victims of a giant octopus attack. But how has no one ever heard of the attack? Well, it never actually happened. If you were a tourist and you came upon this monument, you might think that at one point a giant octopus completely swallowed a ferry off the coast of Manhattan, but no. The cast bronze sculpture, which was created by Joseph Reginella, is a monument honoring the victims of a fake Staten Island ferry disaster. Why would someone make this up? It doesn't make any sense. The truth? This is just a fun monument that is used to direct people to a fake museum that sits nearby. Still, it's a pretty cool monument to get a snapshot of the next time you find yourself in New York. Maybe you can fool people with a photo on social media. I was certainly fooled when I first saw a picture of the sculpture. The real Moby Dick. Believe it or not, Moby Dick's real name is Mocha Dick, and he was the scourge of the sea back in the 19th century. Mocha Dick got his name after the island of Mocha in Chile, near the place where he was first spotted. He was one of the biggest, most aggressive, and most powerful whales to ever exist, and he was a terrorizer. Today, the whale is largely forgotten, but for quite a long time, he was known as the legendary destroyer of ships. It's said that this whale, who was the original inspiration for the name Moby Dick in Herman Melville's book, destroyed over 20 whaling ships and battled with another 80. It apparently took over 28 years before this whale was inevitably killed in a dramatic encounter with whalers. It was claimed that at the time of his death, Mocha Dick had no less than 20 harpoons already lodged in his back. I can't for the life of me understand why they didn't just leave this beast alone. The ocean is a big place. There has to be better things to do than go searching out the one whale who wants to take down any ship he sees. But then again, I'm not in the whaling business, so what do I know? From unsavory animal bits to things that may not even be food, here are 11 disgusting foods Westerners eat. Artificial calamari. This is said to be an urban legend, and all legends stem from some element of truth no matter how small. This may or may not be true, but it is interesting enough to share. It focuses on imitation calamari. It began when someone saw a box of artificial calamari at a pig farm. When asked what it was, someone said that it was pig bung or pig rectum. If you see a picture of bung, you'll notice that it looks very similar to calamari when fried. It's not uncommon, and many say it's really tasty. I don't know about you, but if I want calamari, that means I do not want a hog's bung. Word spread like wildfire, and everyone started accusing restaurants of selling bung as calamari. This would be illegal, and since not much was ever officially spoken after that, it wouldn't surprise me if the silence was to avoid trouble. The study is that the reason the man didn't speak up was because his girlfriend didn't want his name being associated with such a subject as a hog's rear end, which doesn't really matter since we eat all kinds of pig parts anyway. We really don't care about bung, man, but what we do care about is the calamari we've been eating and everyone trying to trick us into eating things we didn't ask for. Bull testicles. There is nothing quite like eating a plate of bull testicles. Who doesn't want to feast on the cooked testicles of a large animal? In the West, bull testicles are a pretty popular meal. It's not something to be eaten every day, but it's not hard to find. Bull testicles are known under many different names such as Montana tenderloins, cowboy caviar, calf fries, prairie oysters, and Rocky Mountain oysters. The testicles used are typically removed from a bull in his youth so that the bull will be less masculine and less aggressive. This generally happens when the calf is branded. Its testicles are cut off and then tossed into a bucket of water. But why throw out perfectly good testicles? After the bull is castrated, its testicles are peeled, washed, rolled in some flour, and then fried to be eaten. They are actually considered to be a pretty tasty delicacy, and just like other meats made from organs, you can cook testicles in a variety of different and exciting ways. You can have deep-fried testicles, sliced testicles, or marinated testicles. This rather crude dish was first popularized by cowboys in the American Old West, though the eating of animal genitalia goes all the way back to ancient Rome. That was back when many people believed that eating an animal sex organ could enhance the same organ on a human. Even today in Asia, some animal genitalia are believed to be an aphrodisiac, but of course this is the most absurd thing you could possibly believe. You're just eating meat. Spray cheese. Spray cheese is often seen as the height of processed food in all its disgusting glory. Spray cheese is gooey, a little orange, and absolutely horrendous for your body, but nonetheless, Americans eat spray cheese like it's going out of style. And while many people claim spray cheese has absolutely no cheese in it, and that's the contents of the can hold nothing but poisonous chemicals, that's actually not completely true. Spray cheese definitely isn't going to do you any favors in the health department. If you're trying to move away from processed foods, you definitely don't want to start sucking spray cheese out of the can. And to be completely honest, nothing that comes squirted from a can is probably going to be that good for you. However, spray cheese actually does contain quite a bit of cheese, and this may surprise a lot of people who have already demonized the product. A typical can of spray cheese really does contain cheddar cheese. However, the deal is that cheese spreads are only required by law to contain 51% cheese, according to an article from Spoon University. So you can deduce what the other 49% of the ingredients consist of. Basically, half the can is liquid cheese, and the other half is anyone's guess. Coolicles. Coolicles don't really have much use existing in the world. If you have ever thought to yourself that normal pickles simply aren't good enough and need to be a little nastier, you may want to try a coolicle. Basically, you take a dill pickle and a cold glass of Kool-Aid and you stuff your pickle inside of it. You are then going to brine your pickle using Kool-Aid and you will eventually be left with an absolutely horrifying coolicle. This bizarre invention came out of Mississippi in the American South, according to the Huffington Post. The end result is a pickle unnaturally colored, usually red, and bursting with that sweet Kool-Aid flavor. And while this may seem like a totally ridiculous creation to some people, to others, it is simply genius. And since its invention, coolicles have been spreading away from Mississippi to other parts of the country. I wouldn't be surprised if Kool-Aid pickles are on store shelves all over the nation in the next couple of years. The best part is you can do it yourself. Just get a gallon of dill pickles, a few packets of Kool-Aid, and a whopping pound of sugar. Pickle away. And now for number 7, but be sure to tell us if you have ever tried any of these foods in the comments below, and be sure to subscribe if you haven't already. Alligator tails. If you are from Canada, Europe, or even Russia, the thought of eating alligator meat is probably completely ridiculous. But not in the United States, and especially not in the southern United States. Alligator is actually a great alternative to chicken or pork, and supposedly the meat is super nutritious for you. In places like Florida, alligators are nearly as widespread as cows, though not quite. As you can imagine, the feasting of alligators goes back many centuries in lots of places in Asia, but has lost its popularity with the decline of the species. But in the US, alligator is still in abundance, and the favorite part of the alligator to eat is the tail. Alligators obviously don't have wings or breasts to eat, but they definitely have big and meaty tails ready for the cooking. You can cook alligator meat in a variety of ways, but a typical restaurant will serve it as an appetizer. Popular ways to cook your alligator tail for a main course is to have it baked, grilled, fried, or sautéed. Agoutic. Agoutic is also known as Alaskan ice cream, and it's not really that weird. It's actually kind of delicious. Some people call it Eskimo ice cream, and it basically consists of dried fish, berries, dried moose or caribou meat, fish or seal oil, all whipped together into a yummy ice cream. This unusual snack was enjoyed for centuries before white men arrived in Alaska. The word agoutic, pronounced agou-duck, actually means to stir. It's a very fitting name considering the dish involves whipping of whole lots of animal fat by hand. Huge batches of Alaskan ice cream used to be stored in the permafrost cellar of a family home so that there was always a little ready for a meal or to serve to guests. Nowadays, agoutic is known widely as Eskimo ice cream, and it has become a favorite not only in Alaska, but in many other regions as well. The best versions of Alaskan ice cream typically use blueberry and salmonberry mixed with seal oil. Brain sandwich. They call it a brain sandwich, but it's honestly a brain burger. This absolutely weird meal consists of a brain patty smacked between 2 hamburger buns and loaded with condiments. Where did such a bizarre dish come from? Well, back in the late 19th century, there was a lot of meat packing going on in Illinois, and each time a cow went to be slaughtered, the brain would be wasted, and that is a lot of meat. And so, the meat needed to be used, thus the brain sandwich was born. To make eating the brains of an animal less disgusting, diners in Missouri began to bread and fry the brains, then swaddle them in a bun or some marble rye. They obscured the flavor even more by slathering on mustard, pickles, and onions, but even with the brain tasting yummy, it was still a tricky dish. For example, whoever was cooking the brains needed to have cold hands, as any warmth had the potential to actually melt the brain in such a way that it would not be cooked very well. You couldn't even deep fry a brain because it would just melt. In any case, brain sandwiches started in Illinois, Missouri, and Indiana, and it's these 3 states where the sandwich is still available today in select restaurants. I highly doubt McDonald's will start selling brain sandwiches anytime soon. Burgoo. Burgoo is one of the most popular dishes in North America. There is probably a burgoo restaurant very close to you right now and you don't even know it. However, it's not burgoo itself that is weird. Modern burgoo is a delicious brown stew that is full of different meats, typically pork, beef, and some kind of bird. All the ingredients in modern burgoo recipes are from things that wouldn't cause someone to turn their nose up in dismay. But original burgoo is a whole different story. Burgoo comes from Kentucky. It's one of the traditional Kentucky dishes, and yes, it has spread throughout the world. Many people claim it was first invented by a Frenchman by the name of Xshaped during the Civil War, but unlike today's burgoo, the original stuff was made out of squirrel, raccoon, possum, rat, owl, and whatever other meats was available. Basically, it was a dish of necessity, a thick stew that used whatever animal bits were nearby. Some even claim the actual name burgoo is just a mispronunciation of bird stew, as the original meal would have used a lot of bird parts. Root beer. Root beer is one of the most common drinks in North America. Mexicans, Americans, and Canadians all drink lots of root beer. But while we might find it delicious, the rest of the world thinks it's absolutely disgusting. The Japanese, the Europeans, the Irish, and basically anyone who doesn't live in the Western Hemisphere finds root beer repulsive. It is unanimously the most disgusting drink in Western culture. Oddly enough, this could be due to a poor choice in ingredients on the part of the original makers. You see, root beer was made originally using sassafras. While totally normal in America, sassafras is used in other countries in medicine. It's like if the Japanese decided to make a famous soft drink taste like cough syrup. Nobody in their right mind would want to drink a beverage that tastes like disgusting cough syrup, and that's how foreigners feel about root beer. If you ever find yourself in Japan and seek out some medicine, you may find it has a familiar root beer smell. And while appealing to Americans, it's definitely disgusting for everyone else. Haggis. Haggis is probably the most disgusting Western food on the planet and also the most popular and most well-known. Haggis is the national dish of Scotland, and it has been made the same way for hundreds and hundreds of years. At its core, haggis is a kind of pudding made from the liver, lungs, and a heart of a sheep. The organs are then mixed with mutton and oatmeal, seasoned heavily with spices, packed into the stomach of the sheep, then boiled to perfection. That's pretty much all the organs in one convenient stomach-wrapped meal. Throughout the 18th century, haggis was popular in both Scotland and England, according to Britannica. However, a food similar to haggis could have been made so far back as the 15th century in other parts of Europe. Today, haggis is enjoyed in a more ritualistic and ceremonial manner, like for a New Year celebration. Turducken. Turducken is one of the most disgusting bird foods created in the West. As the bizarre name would suggest, turducken is a chicken, turkey, and duck. First, the chicken is stuffed into a duck, then the duck is stuffed into a turkey. You get all your favorite birds stuffed inside of each other for one complicated dish. This way, when the turducken is sliced, every single slice contains a little bit of chicken, a little bit of duck, and a little bit of turkey, complete with stuffing between the layers. It's not a difficult dish to make, but it will eat up a lot of time. It's definitely the most complicated Thanksgiving recipe. The true origin of this strange dish is unknown, but many believe that it was first invented by a Louisiana chef back in the 1970s or the 1980s. Paul Prudhomme trademarked the name in 1986 and served it at his restaurant in Louisiana. Since then, the recipe has exploded, and it's even growing now in popularity as a fancy dish for Thanksgiving. Which of these foods do you want to go out right now and feast on? Hi everyone! From the cage of death to a glass box with a damaged door, here are 10 incidents of when cage diving went wrong. When crocs attack. Crocodiles are nothing to mess with. In the small town of Darwin in Australia, there is a famous tourist attraction known as the Cage of Death. Tourists pay money to be placed inside of this cage and dangled above hungry crocodiles. However, a Dutch tourist had a very unpleasant journey inside the Cage of Death back in 2015. She ended up being stuck inside the cage for a full half hour while a rather large crocodile waited beneath her, undoubtedly with hopes of eating the poor woman. The manager of the park claimed the tourist was never in danger while her cage was stuck above the hungry crocodiles, but it nevertheless gave her a serious fright. Normally, a cage dive lasts about 15 minutes, but because she got stuck in the cage suspended above the crocodiles, she got an extra 15 minutes for the same money. Have you ever visited the death box? Perhaps after hearing about this incident, you won't want to. Let me know in the comments below. Great white shark gets stuck. This is perhaps one of the most disturbing events that have happened recently. It happened in the year 2019 and has undoubtedly aroused the greatest criticism from environmentalists, in addition to generating international commotion about the damage that diving can cause to animals. In this event, it was not the cage diver who was injured, but rather the shark. It happened when a great white shark lunged at 4 divers who were inside a secure cage off the coast of Baja California in Mexico. But this was not like any other cage diving incident. The shark swam up to the cage, lunged to try and attack the divers, and then became stuck between the bars. He stuck his head between the bars and managed to scare the divers off. But here's where things went wrong. The shark ended up committing suicide by doing this. Its head got stuck between the bars and it ended up thrashing until the metal cut into its gills. After a painfully long time of watching the shark struggle and the ocean water fill with its blood, the shark eventually went limp and floated down into the murky depths. This is the first recorded incident of a shark accidentally killing itself in a diving cage. The divers weren't injured, but you can bet they were definitely worth it in terms of their cage diving experience. Escape from great white shark. This is a perfect example of out of the pan and into the fire. A man named Ming Chan was off the coast of Mexico inside a diving cage when an enormous great white shark decided to try and get inside. It at first appeared that the shark was only trying to eat the tuna used as bait to lure it near the cage. However, after an unsettling amount of thrashing and violent behavior, the diver decided to escape from the cage. What he didn't expect was to escape through the bars of the cage, only to stumble upon two more great white sharks directly below him. While all this was happening, the first shark got into his cage and ended up thrashing its way out through the top, which was absolutely delightful for all of the spectators involved, as they watched a massive shark fly out of the cage that had just moments before held a man. And as for Ming Chan himself, he managed to swim out of harm's way only moments later. The man claims that if it had not been for his experience and calm situational behavior, he very well could have been a goner. You can actually find this video on YouTube, as it has been viewed over 6 million times and is one of the most famous shark cage accidents in the world. Fight with a shark. Nobody wants to get in a fight with a shark. In fact, this is one of the last creatures I would ever want to get in a fight with. But what do you do when you are diving with sharks in a transparent glass cage and the door to the cage refuses to stay closed? This is what happened a few years ago off the western coast of Mexico when a man had to make a dramatic escape from 5 underwater predators. He first went below water in his transparent glass cube wearing a black suit and snorkeling gear, but quickly realized that the door to his cage would not close. He had to keep it closed with his hand, like when the lock is broken and you try to stop people from coming into the bathroom. What followed was something out of a horror movie. According to a news report, the sharks were trying to get into his cage and the man had to continue fighting them off and trying to keep the door closed. It became quite a struggle, with the shark even managing to get its nose inside the cage and the man having to beat it off. In the end, he did manage to escape and get back to the boat. Nothing unfortunate happened, just a few cuts on his hands from the glass in the cage, and he was probably very frightened. Shark cage diving boat tips over. 2008 was a horrible year for cage diving. An incident involving a capsized boat drowned 2 American tourists and 1 Norwegian tourist who had been hoping to go on a cage diving adventure. But rather than a freak accident happening while they were inside the cage, they never even got the chance. Their boat was hit by a freak wave. It flipped over. The 3 tourists drowned and 16 other people suffered minor injuries. This happened in Gansby, which is a small town roughly 2 hours from Cape Town in South Africa. Known as the Great White Shark Capital of the world, this is an extremely popular place to go cage diving. Unfortunately, this is just one of those incidents where being on a boat went horribly wrong. The boat had just anchored, they were preparing to lower the first cage, and then a giant wave flipped their boat right over. The only lucky part was that nobody else was injured and that there were no sharks in the water at the time. Cage diving forensics. We have been talking a lot about when cage diving goes wrong. But what about when the police use underwater cages to help search for missing bodies? This story is too unreal to be true. You see, evading crocodiles while searching for missing people or any other kind of forensic evidence in a river in the Northern Territory of Australia is tough. Crocodiles in the outback are some seriously mean beasts, and there is not much that authorities can do for their scuba divers when they are supposed to be looking for bodies. That is until authorities realized that they could use an underwater cage with the help of grappling hooks and sonar technology to properly sweep across the floor of the river in search of the missing. Luckily, nothing went wrong during the 2019 search for the body of a pilot who had suffered a fatal crash while flying his gyrocopter and then plummeted into the river. The body was eventually found using the underwater cage, and nobody ended up being eaten by crocodiles. So while this may not be a story of what can go wrong cage diving, you need to be careful while flying your gyrocopter. Unexpected shark murders. The next incident takes us back to Gansby in South Africa, but rather than the tourists being killed, this time the cage divers were in for a rather unpleasant viewing of a shark murder. It happened in February of 2020, and the unsuspecting tourists aboard the cage diving boat had front row seats to a massacre of sharks. The tourists were on board the boat as men on fishing boats began to capture and kill bronze whaler sharks right before their eyes. The act was completely legal, but that doesn't make it any less unnerving or bizarre for the tourists to see. Nobody wants to watch the beautiful animals they had come to get up close to be slaughtered directly in front of them, and the tourists no doubt left South Africa with a bitter taste in their mouth. This was an unwanted front seat to the brutal realism of shark fishing. Too young to dive? A travel blogger couple is in hot water after they put their 5-year-old son inside a shark cage. Now, let me start by saying that nothing went wrong here other than the travel bloggers basically ruined their blogging careers by being labeled as irresponsible parents. But it does not stop the world of what-ifs from exploding. From the video they posted online of their small child diving inside the cage with nearby sharks, you can clearly see that the bars of the cage are hardly big enough to even contain the child. He could very easily have slipped from the cage straight into a shark's mouth. For Deborah Dixon Smith, director of Dive Planet Travel, it is irresponsible to take young children diving. I think learning to dive with your kids is one of the most magical and bonding experiences you can have as a parent, but diving your kids with sharks, that's awful, she said. Fortunately, nobody was injured, and the video did end up clocking over 4 million views, but it's still a hot topic for debate. What do you think? Should children that small be allowed to dive with sharks? Let me know in the comments below. Almost eaten. The last thing you want to happen while diving with sharks is for one of them to start eating your cage. This is what happened to Mark Curry, who had been on a diving expedition near Cape Town in South Africa. He climbed into the cage, got himself settled, and within minutes, a giant great white shark was chewing the bars of his cage and shaking him around violently. At first, Mr. Curry thought it was completely normal, but then the shark began to bite through the bars of his enclosure. Then things got really bad. The cage began to sink. He had no choice but to flee the cage and swim into open water where the violent shark was still trying to attack him. One of the only things that saved his life was the captain of the boat hitting the shark on the head with an iron pole. However, Mr. Curry claims in a report from The Guardian that the shark being hit on the head only made it angrier. Mr. Curry did end up being dragged back to the safety of the boat by the captain, but by then he was in a terrible state of panic. As a side note, just a few weeks before this horrifying accident, a 77-year-old woman disappeared while swimming in the same area. Only her bathing cap was found later, and local authorities believed she was eaten by a great white shark. Snapped cables. Unfortunately, here's a place we've already talked about, Cage of Death. Recently, in Darwin, 2 people fell into a crocodile tank when their viewing cage collapsed. The Cage of Death at Darwin's Crocosaurus Cove just about claimed 2 lives when a cable failed and caused the viewing cage to fall with the spectators still inside of it. Nobody was injured, but the 2 people in the cage were definitely stunned and hysterical. The cage is supposed to be stable, and yet it snapped and crashed, landing at an awkward 45-degree angle. According to the Daily Telegraph, witnesses claimed pieces flew off the cage when it crashed. It was lucky that the staff acted quickly, pulling the cage to the side of the aquarium and promptly getting the pair of tourists out. Fortunately, the giant crocodile didn't even try to eat them. He just stood by watching what was happening. After the stressful ordeal, the agitated couple went to the cafe and probably had a couple of drinks. Even though no one was hurt here, it is unlucky to have this place in these incidents twice. Hopefully, if you ever want to visit this place, everything will be taken care of and this cage will work perfectly. After hearing all these incredible stories, how eager are you to go cage diving? Have you ever done it before? Tell me in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and if you haven't already, feel free to subscribe. See you next time.